Are you going to finish that, Florentine? Are you going to leave it there?
When you start to bore me, I'll just start eating it. So what do you think, John? Oh, look, skid marks.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of the Evo podcast. Last episode was a special which John Barker did, who is sat to my right here, with the Jaguar F-Type. If you haven't listened to it, what was that like? A room full of experts and
me.
Heroes. And you, and John.
It was good. It was good. It took a lot of getting together because they're busy. Well, one particular guy, Ian Callum's very busy.
Yes.
So there was one date that we could finally do in his diary which suited everybody else. So yeah, got together. Mike Cross, who's leading vehicle integrity, which basically sets the character for the car, the F-Type in this instance. And I worked for him while I was at Jag between 2011 and 2017. And then we had program director, which was Russ Varney, who I remember from being an apprentice way back in the 80s. He's got a lot less hair. I'm a bit chubbier. And there was Ian Callum himself, who designed the car. So yeah, it was a good chat. The lead-in being CX-75. And there was one at Callum. We did we didn't credit, but we did the podcast at Callum Design. And he's got one of the CX-75s that he's converting to full road.
Yes.
Wow. So the first time I've seen one of those. Still a great looking car, quite small. Yeah. But yeah, the podcast was really good. Yeah, you can find it on the website.
Yes, yeah, it's a similar format to the Lotus Elise that Dickie did. So have a listen. That's a fascinating one. We're going to be doing more of those as well. So keep an eye out. And also with me in this episode, we've got Yusuf and James, who've all been flat out. Well, everyone's been flat out.
I've been in Croatia on holiday, but yeah, flat out. Yeah.
Who signed that off?
We need to have a chat.
That's why we've all been so busy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the real holiday show now. I've been to Croatia, it's lovely. Same between holiday, which we need to make sure that doesn't get signed off again anytime soon. What have you been up to?
So I went to Germany to see the new Golf GTI Edition 50. And it was a bit of a weird one. We didn't know exactly what we were going to see. It sounded like a bit of a badge and stickers job kind of thing.
Which what VW's been sort of a bit guilty of, haven't they?
Yeah.
Here's a new car with 10 PS and a new graphic on
the
tailgate.
exactly. And it's obviously been a while since they gave us a Club Sport S, the Mark 7, which was a proper hardcore two-seat hot hatch. But turned up and it was like a full-blown track car pretty much, so it's much stiffer than the standard car. They've got new arms, they've got new springs, dampers, and it's all based on the Club Sport S from 9 years ago. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting project. Not 2 seats, no, because I think this gen of Golf GTI is only available as a 5-door, and they thought it'd be a bit weird to kind of open the back door and have a cage.
That hasn't stopped other people doing it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think Project 8 did that. Yeah,
and McGann did it as well, didn't it? The last Trophy R.
Yes,
it did. Yeah. Perhaps they looked at the sales figures of that and
maybe
need
not.
to keep some practicality.
Yeah, but it's quite an extreme car, and it did have a crack at the Nürburgring front drive record recently. I think it was a second and a half or something off the Civic Type R. So pretty close.
A long track.
And on a damp circuit as well.
Are they going to have another go?
They seem like they want to, because that was just one run as well. Yeah. So they had one crack at the lap because it was raining all day. And apparently there's more to come from it. Exciting.
What's the tyre it's on?
It's on a Bridgestone Potenza race tyre, which is road legal, but they call it like a semi-slick. So it's not much tread on it at all. But all those chassis upgrades are part of the performance pack, which is optional. So yeah, Benny Loiter took it around the ring, 746, I think it was. Somebody will correct me. But
he's a good guy, Benny. He's so enthusiastic, isn't he? He's the smiliest person.
Like, this is the best car ever, and he's so excited about it. Yeah.
So you can get the whole chassis as an option.
Yeah. So I think as standard, they're going with the normal Club Sport spec chassis. And then you go for the performance pack, and that gives you the stiffer springs, recalibrated dampers, new geometry, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you have a go in it? Or we got to wait for that?
I had a go in it in a straight line on a 3-lane kind of test track. so yeah, the most kind of dynamic and exciting Golf they've released in years, we drove in a straight line, which wasn't the most exciting.
Did you get to do an elk test?
I did do some elk tests, at 70 miles an hour. And it does feel, I mean, you can't exactly write a first drive on what I got to do, but...
certain magazines.
They remain unnamed. But yeah, it did feel more positive, because I think the standard GTI can feel quite woolly around the straight ahead, there's a bit of roll and it doesn't feel super honed and focused. This does feel a bit more like a Type R in terms of how precise it was, lack of roll and things, but I'm a little bit worried about the fact that it's 50% stiffer than the Club Sport, because this test track was super smooth and it was still picking up sort of little imperfections there. So on UK roads it might be a different story, but we've asked for a hardcore Mark 8 for a while. So
careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, oh, it's rubbish now. Like, shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, can you soften it off a bit?
Yeah.
Because that Club Sport S came out of nowhere. Were you on that car the year 2016, wasn't it?
Nope.
But that surprised all of us when we drove that. Finished third behind a 911R and a 570.
Wow.
Great car.
And it's a great car, and it is one of those.
Yeah.
I think we always get a little bit easy to go into. Renault Sport Meganes are the ultimate or Civic Type R's, but that Club Sport S, no surprise that I think a lot of the development team are ex-Porsche. It feels very honed, and those sort of engineering elements to it. It's not. I know what you're saying with it. Oh, it's 50% stiffer, but I hope that they've got that same mindset of it's for the right reasons and it all works together. It's not just a Excel spreadsheet, right? Is it stiffer? Yes. And nothing's connected. It all hopefully will be. I've done a lot of work. All the suspension arms have changed, aren't they, as well? So
so it's got new bushes, it's got new front uprights for more camber. The dampers are the same as the Club Sport, just retuned for the stiffer springs. And they have actually benchmarked the Mark 7 against it in development to make it feel like that, because they openly admit that was the high point of GTIs, and they're trying to do that again really with this one.
Big to differ.
So the Mark 5 actually,
We'll get on to that soon, don't we?
It's always one. When do we drive? We're not going to drive it for a while properly, are we?
Yes, I think the launch is early next year.
Okay.
But that'll probably be in Germany somewhere. And I think the real test is probably in the UK, given how much stiffer it is and how much more focused. Yeah. If it can work here, then I think it'll be a pretty awesome thing.
Sounds
exciting.
Good. Yeah. Talking of the Nürburgring, you just got back literally last night from the Nürburgring.
Got back a few hours ago.
You'll all be surprised here. James has been at another race circuit.
It's not in my contract, but I'm working on it.
He's trying to wheedle it in. So what you've been up to? I think we're going to touch on it a bit later on. But give us an overview of what we're going to talk about later. Yeah,
we can go into more depth in a bit. But I've just got back from something called Perfections Training in German with a K, which is an annual event organised by a media company in Germany, and they invite, I think, a couple of hundred people to kind of learn the track in depth, following expert instructors in their own cars. So starting at a slow pace, gradually getting quicker and quicker, and kind of learning the track in the most detailed way possible. So, it was quite intense.
And you didn't take holiday for this. You've claimed this as work.
For me, it's work. I'm going to say it's work. But I was driving the new 911 GT3, which is our first chance to drive it. Since the launch earlier in the year, so it was a first official.
I see what you're trying to do here. Yeah, quite. We'll come back to that. That's that. You were talking about that earlier. And that's quite a fascinating process. Just of there's lots of Nürburgring conversations that have been had, and we're going to do a separate podcast, I think, just on the place. But that course you've just done, I think, we're going to touch on that and go into a bit more detail later on. JB, what else have you been up to other than trying to get your old colleagues together? Yeah,
apart from that, I tested out the new Nimbus 2025, which is the latest strain of COVID.
Nice.
Now it knocked me for 6 for the whole 10 days.
How many stars?
In terms of infectiousness, not too bad. That was probably a 2. And in terms of poleaxing you, it's probably a 5.
Right, okay.
Will it be at Ecote, is the question?
I hope not. You better hope not. So that just got in the way of writing the 2000s test, which
our latest series in the Evo eras, which we'll come on to later. Talking about Ecote, we've just come back from doing a recce for Ecote, haven't we? Which was we'll ignore the roads. There's a good reason for doing a recce to tell us not to go back there.
We went to find the roads, didn't
we? We didn't find them. What we did find is we were in an old Audi RS2 and a 20-valve Quattro and an RS3 in 35 plus heat. But we did find some perfect roads for those old, smaller cars, and that was quite fascinating.
I actually loved the driving on that trip, but then when you look back, it's like imagine a Revuelto on those roads just would not work. It'd be taking up both lanes, and
But that was the first time you spent any time in some of those older cars with things like cassette players.
Cassette players,
Apart from the 80s.
You'll have to show me around those.
Yeah.
I have driven that exact Quattro actually on the 80s test.
Yeah.
It's funny, I really didn't like it on that test because I drove it and I was like, what is this? Just so baggy and didn't feel special as a Quattro homologation car. And then the more time I spent in it in the Pyrenees, it kind of got under my skin a bit because you've just got to slow yourself down and drive to.
I really liked it. I think we're on the same page
I'm
now.
kind of siding with you now.
Yeah.
I understand the appeal. Then the RS2 was first time I'd driven one of those, and that kind of lived up to what you expect. Like a hot four-wheel drive Audi estate would feel like. It felt much tighter, really capable, sure-footed, and I think we all came away from that test thinking that was
mega. The RS2 on those roads. It just, you can imagine the road testers of their time when it was new, what they were experiencing. It was everything that you've read about that car.
Yeah,
and it's from an era where there's no videos or anything like that. Might have been on TIFF, might have driven it around for Top Gear, but when it comes back to the Golf, you can tell it had engineering input from some real specialist people, and everything just works. It was a lovely thing, even in the heat, and the aircon worked. So
it did,
You end up driving it to its strengths, though, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Work it out, and then when to get
slow
on the
in,
throttle,
fast out, and
get on the throttle, and
get it on,
get the boost up, and really use the traction.
Yeah.
It's what we found, isn't it, Rod, doing the Evo Eras series, is that if you approach older cars, because we had an RS3 on that test, and actually getting into the RS3 felt alien.
Yeah.
After you got out of the Quattro,
everything was hyper responsive and numb.
And you ended up having to adjust the way you drove the RS3.
Yeah.
Rather than how you got into the old cars, they felt second nature, just getting it right. You got all the weighting as you'd expect. You got in the RS3s, you say everything was really sensitive. You look like a learner driver kangarooing up the road in an automatic. What is going on? I've forgotten how to drive, because everything is just. You feel you're just actually in the car, not doing anything, it took ages to find out. Hang on a minute, recalibrate, start again almost.
I quite enjoyed it on the 5-hour drive back to the airport.
I thought you did.
Well, you guys were faking up with no aircon. But I get what you mean.
It was almost took a longer after you spent time in the two older cars. It took longer to uncover the RS3's talents.
Yeah.
Which is a car that actually we've been surprised with. We've had it in the four-wheel drive test, and we've had it against the Yaris and the AMG, haven't we? But it seemed to take longer for its character to come through. Yeah,
because I think the older cars, they give you that involvement through the controls mainly, and the feedback and how narrow they are, how easy they are to place. Whereas the RS3, when you're driving normally, it could just be an A3 for the most part, and you need to drive it quickly to see what it can do and for it to be exciting, which you can't really do that often on those kinds of roads because they're so narrow and windy and technical. But it's a great thing. RS2 sort of, I'm just looking at an E30 M3 on the cover of our 80s issue, and I've always loved an E30 M3, but you spend that much time and do 700 miles in an RS2. It's a bit of a dark horse, isn't it?
I quite fancy one of those.
You dial into the characteristic. The company characteristics.
Yeah, and it's always telling when you're sat at the airport coming back and you're ignoring all your work emails and messages and you're looking at values of RS2s.
Which are decent, aren't
they? Are.
They're going up.
And not many of them as well. No. So that's a cracking car. Bringing us back into the current day, minus Nimbus 2025. But sadly, something that appears to be a bit of a dying breed was our sports car test, isn't it? A year ago now, was it? We did our big or 18 months.
About a year and
longer.
A half ago.
State of the nation for all the hot hatches, and we had 18 cars.
That's right.
Could have had 20, but the Audi S3 and RS3 were currently in mid-transition.
Facelift,
So we had 18 cars there, but we've just done... We'd do the same with sports cars. How many did we have?
5. Although I would qualify that by saying we could have widened the parameters a bit and have things like the MX-5, which is evergreen, still brilliant, but kind of priced a bit lower than the Heartland. And then at the upper end of the scale, there's all kinds of like quasi supercars and there's really rare groove stuff, sort of GBSs and Caterhams and BACs and things. But we wanted to focus on the kind of Heartland. So things like the Alpine A110, the Lotus Emira, the Ford Mustang, the BMW M2 that's just been updated. And then we were working out which Porsche to put in there because the 911 is a sports car, but it's kind of supercar money now. It's
Well, it's supercar old money, isn't it? Because supercars are now more expensive again. But it's that thing, that 911s, no one's ever gone up against it. And all those cars you've just mentioned are all purposely almost sub that level. Not all of them on pricing, because the Emira's quite punchy, isn't it? Because the base Carrera is
104, I think it is now.
And the Emira V6
96. So it's kind of creeping up there
before you discount them. But it's always odd, isn't it? Where does the 911, does it go up against Vantages, or does it go up against a Mustang and a BMW M2? And it always feels wrong to put it into that category. So we had our Boxster.
That's right.
GTS.
So we decided to go with a 718 rather than a 911. Porsche didn't have a Cayman at the time, so our Fast Fleet Boxster gamely leapt off the subs bench to take part in the test. So those were the 5 cars.
Interesting mix, isn't it? You've got everything from a massive muscle car, what you consider a muscle car, and that, because it was the Mustang GT, not the Dark Horse, and it didn't have 700 gears. It only had
6-speed manual this time.
But it's a contracting market if you just hone in on those kind of what traditional sports cars, but most people would think. But within those models, there's A110s, there's multiple variants of it, 2 variants of the Mustang,
2 of the Emira as well.
2 of the Emira, 2 BMWs, because an M240i is always that kind of sleeper. When you see one, you're like, well, that's interesting. And obviously the Boxster Cayman range is quite expansive. But actually the model numbers is quite small, isn't it? But it's quite busy within it. And obviously there's a Z4 on the periphery with the 6-speed manual that we've had, which is good. But when you look at those core sports cars, it's still dwindling, sadly. And Boxster
Supra's gone, GR86 is gone.
Toyota, who were great at coming back in, wasn't it? As you said, the GT86 or GR, wasn't it? GR and Supra have gone. Boxster Cayman, October 25 production ends of those 2 cars, and they're not coming back yet, I think.
With batteries. Maybe not.
Without batteries, but it's still an important segment, isn't it? I mean, it's, some will say, but they don't sell them. There's not enough sales. But you always, if you're a sports car company, you need a sports car. And if you're someone like BMW or Toyota, you always need those halo cars and those other cars to either keep someone in the brand or give them a reason to come and look at what you've got. But they're all really strong, really good cars, aren't they? They're probably the best they've ever been, but there's fewer people making them. But there seems to be more people want them. But whether that's enough...
Yeah, they're very strong characters, all of them.
All of them very different.
Very discrete, all very different, aren't they? They're all not trying to... None of them are trying to do the same thing.
No.
Which is normally what kills a segment, is when, particularly those hot hatches, they're all 2-litre DSG, front-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, and they're all much of a muchness. But those sports cars are...
Even the ones that seem like they're doing the same thing, like the Emira and a Cayman or Boxster, feel completely different. And they have their own characters.
And the Alpine again.
The Alpine, is its own thing.
Yeah, but the Alpine, which you think, well, that's competing with the Porsche and the Lotus. But actually, it's
totally different experience.
Which is why you see, I think you're seeing small tribes, aren't you? Particularly of A110 owners. I mean, there was 7-8 at our last track evening at Donington Park a couple of weeks ago before we were recording this, and just it's become that sort of car default car, maybe at the expense of Caymans and Boxers, which have always suffered a bit of, well, I'd rather push myself for a 911. But the A110 has come in. But then Lotus should be in that space.
That's where they should be.
And they're not, which leads us sort of neatly on. What's going on at Lotus? If anyone knows, please fax us, probably, because that's, I think, the way Lotus is going.
We should do a time check so that we know what the news is. I
did check just before we started recording, and it's already moved on from, we're recording this on a Thursday, so there was a story that broke on a Friday afternoon, which is always a good time for burying bad news on a heat wave on a Friday. It was in the FT that Lotus was closing Hethel, which sent sort of the alarm bells ringing. Then there was a statement released over the weekend by Lotus, which there's 2 things I had issue with it. One, it was all written in caps lock. So, and
was there a safe word in there as well?
and it was all centralised.
Capital letters down one side.
But it was one of those kind of statements that in today's world you think that's been written by AI. But it also had a whiff of the football chairman backing the manager just before he sacks him.
Right.
There was nothing in there to say that no, it's all speculation.
Yes.
We're going to do this. We're investing. We're building this, and this is happening.
Yeah.
It was all. The UK is still part of Lotus and very important.
Yeah,
It's
but
a bit
in what
like,
way is the question?
Yeah, it's
isn't
a bit like the cat is still part of the family, but if it wakes me up at 2:00 in the morning again, it's out. And then on the following Monday, Lotus Technology acquired 100% stake in Lotus Cars or Lotus UK as well. So there is stuff going on behind the scenes, but you just
you never
worry.
know which bits are owned by who.
Yes.
So you need to do the research to work out who's buying what or selling what,
Yeah,
don't
or
you?
who's just moving their shares from that part of a company into another
Yeah.
part. And what does that mean? And then there's, off the back of the Lotus news, there's been other sort of comments that actually it's not a Lotus issue, it's a Geely issue, because Volvo are also slightly sort of not quite heading in or not quite performing as expected, and they're having similar challenges in Sweden with production dropping and sales not great. And then, was it a year ago, I think Volvo had to stop funding Polestar because it was needed to focus on its own stuff. So sadly, it does feel like a bit of a group issue with Geely rather than Lotus, but of course Lotus is the one that tugs on our heartstrings the
Yeah, of
most.
course, yeah.
And
But they're still not selling cars, are they? That's the issue.
That's the thing. If you don't sell cars, I mean, their sales are 50% down for this first quarter of 2025.
Yeah.
Last year's numbers were maybe slightly inflated because they were pushing Electras and Amiras and Amiras out to dealers and getting them out, because they've just updated the Amira, haven't they? But they sent us the old
And the
car
Amira.
rather than the new car.
Yeah, they did. Also, I think the Amira is half of those sales, isn't it?
Yes.
Which for a company that's reinventing itself
Yeah.
as an EV specialist,
Yeah,
if half
yeah.
your sales are still
Yeah.
the mid-engine sports
Yeah,
cars.
and particularly if China aren't buying your electric cars, I think you've got a problem, because that's why you're doing them. Europe will pick them up, and
It's
US.
the business plan, isn't it?
The plan is electric cars pays for the ICE cars. But if half your sales are ICE cars that are in a small dwindling market, as we've discovered trying to do a group test with them, and the Amira hasn't had the greatest of kind of introductions with delays, customers haven't been happy with the way they've been treated. I think there was lots of warm and cuddly comms when you put your deposit down, and they had a queue off the stand at the Festival of Speed when they revealed it. And everything was great, and then it was like delivery date slipping, can't get hold of anyone at the factory, my dealer doesn't know what's going on, and the dealers are in the same position as the customers, they don't know what's going on, so you lose all that goodwill.
Yeah. And then we drove it and it wasn't quite what we expected as well.
They sent us a Amira V6 manual which was a sport model, but on a Tour chassis.
Right.
So it had the Goodyear Eagle F1 tyres, not the Michelin tyres. Also came, I think everyone's test car at the same time, this is 3 years ago, came with a sheet of A4 of all the things to expect not to work because these were pre-production cars. I don't think our car, the ABS, was functioning, and there was a sort of a quip, don't crash because we don't know if the airbags are switched on. And the last thing was, please take a 10mm spanner so you can turn it off and turn it on again with the battery.
Right,
and you're just
okay.
thinking...
It's like an old Lotus, why are we complaining?
Well, it's authenticity, isn't it? But I think from that point on, all the kind of hope has started to ebb away that actually nothing has really changed.
Yeah.
And sadly, that the investment that Hethel required, it's got some amazing production facilities, but it doesn't matter what you put down the line if you haven't got that right in the first place. And it seems there was delay with the 4-cylinder car, because that car's always been, I think, at its best with the AMG engine. It feels like that's what it was designed for, rather than with the V6 from the Toyota.
Yeah, I've not driven one. I'd love to try one.
It feels much closer to what you'd expect it to be, to an A110. You think actually that's going to give it a challenge.
Yeah.
But that was delayed because I think the rumour is that they spent so long trying to get the V6 to market, they missed the certification on the 4-cylinder engines, had to wait for that to be redone because Mercedes had updated it. And it's just you've got all this opportunity, you've got the backing of a big Chinese funder, and you sort of keep scoring multiple own goals.
Fumble it.
But yeah, the 4-cylinder feels to be the Amira that we're all expecting, but I do have a slight fear that we'll never actually experience it at its full potential, because it's now turbo and SE, isn't it?
It's turbo and SE, so the turbo I think has just under 400 horsepower or 360. So still the AMG engine, and then it's over 400 with the SE.
Similar output to the V6 actually.
Yeah.
Roughly the same. Yeah.
But for me, it's funny because on that test when we had the A110 and the Amira, I got out of the A110 thinking this is what a Lotus should feel like, and you get in the Amira and it's like a little bit busy and it doesn't feel super well honed. And that was the Lotus thing. I mean, they were always maybe a bit more exciting, a bit more feedback than a Porsche. And then you had to live with build quality and reliability and things. But now it feels like they've got the design right, because it is an amazing looking car.
And so much presence.
The interior is great, but then you drive it and it's a bit of a disappointment. It's not a bad car to drive, but
as you
it
say,
doesn't
it
have
used
the
to be
polish.
perhaps the other way around.
Yeah.
Is that because of the badge that it wears, the bag? So therefore, the baggage it brings. Your expectation of a Lotus is how it drives will be to a higher level than maybe if it was.
But I think just looking at what they've done in the past, even with the Evora, it's not too much expectation to have a car as good as the Evora was, or better,
particularly
with all this investment.
Particularly if you were to take the Emira body off, you would have an Evora.
Exactly.
Essentially, yeah.
So it's quite impressive. That, I think, is where the disappointment comes from, isn't it? Because you can do it because they've done it with the Evora, and then you're adding mass with a bigger body and a nicer interior, but that's understandable because that's what customers want. There's no point building something that no one's going to buy, but when you build something that people say they want to buy and they still don't buy it because you've got some of those core elements wrong, it's that's the disappointing thing, I think, with that car, because you want to love it.
Up at that price level, they've got to be at the top of their game. They've got to deliver, because they're never going to match the refinement and sort of quality feel of the Porsche.
The universal appeal,
they're not doing the numbers, are they? So they've got to make it bespoke, but it's got to
the original
deliver.
Target price for the 4-cylinder was below 60 grand. But obviously the world is a very different place now from what it was.
It's moved up. But even going back to the F-Type, I think if you were to have a last of the line P450, not a 575R that just wants to sort of rip up the road, but if you had a Dickie's long termer, the last one we ran, that alongside an Emira, I think you'd be more impressed than the F-Type would be. Far more advanced, feel a more advanced car, better dynamically, nicer thing to live with, because
just a more rounded car.
Because it's got the quality of the interior. It still looks amazing and it drives better. And I think that's the problem of what Lotus have backed themselves into building a sports car, not on the cheap. They've invested in it, but just the execution has not been. Whether that's the people, they haven't got the right people in to execute that.
But it is a little bit ironic to drive an Alpine, which essentially uses the same technology under the skin and just makes a much more compelling case. Dynamically, the looks of the Emira, fantastic. But the dynamics are all on the Alpine. Which is a shame.
Well, hopefully. No, there's not much hope, actually. It's just,
half an hour later.
It's still not great.
We'll update at the end of the podcast.
We have some with the news channel to see what's happening. But anyway, back to that test. What was... We won't give away the verdict. We'd like to read that. But with such... how do we compare a Mustang with a Boxster or a A110 or an M2 and stuff? Is it just... It's looking, isn't it, at what that's the sports car offering, so you have to compare with what's available, don't you?
The idea of the test was it's kind of a cross-section of that bit of the market as it stands. And you had three kind of kindred spirits in the Alpine and the Emira and the 718 Porsche, and that they're all mid-engine sports cars. And then the M2 and the Mustang are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're both, coupes, I suppose, rather than sports cars. But
they're more practical as well. For some people who've got small kids, then that's the option, isn't it?
Yeah. When we were analysing each car, we wanted to see, how well does it do the job it's intended to do. And it's kind of a snapshot of that bit of the market. It was actually 5 really, really good cars. There was no bad car there.
Not having just completely panned the Emira for 10 minutes, but
it still had elements of magic. I mean, we were testing on the North York Moors, really challenging bit of road, and sort of in. You're an engineer, John. In heave, is that the right term? When you go over
and head toss and all sorts of.
I'm sorry.
This is the way engineers talk. So.
But the Emira was amazing over the crests and stuff. It was so controlled, so much traction and stuff. And then the elements we were disappointed with, we just covered. Things like the steering and the way the steering weights up is a bit odd. But all of the cars had moments of magic on that road, and all of us drove them at different times, different weather. It chucked down with rain at one point. It's kind of a poignant test in some ways, because the standard of sports cars at the moment is so high. But because of factors outside of that kind of genre's control, it is a dying breed, because manufacturers can't invest in the platforms to keep them going. They're under so much pressure in other ways. Consumer habits are changing.
Yeah.
People have got less disposable income to blow on a two-seater toy than they used to.
Yeah, it becomes the two-seater becomes the toy. Therefore, it doesn't necessarily need to be used or new, so it can be a used car.
And more ordinary cars, in inverted commas, have become so much faster, more capable and better to drive that you don't necessarily need a sports car now to have a performance car.
Yeah.
No, but there's still, so on that point with the Mustang and the BMW, yes, you can have a family saloon car with similar power outputs, but they still do something that only a sports car that's been engineered properly will deliver. Won't they? They're still special standout cars from...
Definitely, yeah.
There's nothing else in the Ford lineup like a Mustang, and BMW M cars, obviously, throughout the lineup are very distinct M cars, and the M240i is a good sub-M car, but then nothing else in the 2 Series lineup is like an M2.
Yeah.
And what is it, 470 horse?
Yeah.
So,
I think it was by far the most powerful car in the test.
But there's there's other saloon cars that you can buy with that sort of power, but they won't have that character of an M2. You do worry that we keep saying, there's not customers out there to buy them, and it will be a thing of, where have all the sports cars gone?
Yeah, you'll be sorry when they've gone.
You opened this topic by describing the hot hatch test where we had, call it 20 cars in Spirit, and now it would be roughly 13, I think, if you did the equivalent test now. If we did this test 2 years from now,
a year from now, probably.
A year from now, Alpine, as we know it, will go off sale. That they have confirmed they are doing an electric one, but we don't know exactly when that will launch. The electric Porsche Cayman replacement is
hanging
sort of, we don't know if and when that will happen. The Emira, who knows if Lotus will still be around to build it. Tragically. And
the thing is, though, the sort of reversing of the product plan is ongoing. Almost every other week there's an announcement that somebody's not making the electric car they said they were going to make.
Yeah, and they're making hybrids instead.
Yeah, and the smaller volume. Yeah. People are buying these sports cars because they're sports cars, because they're quite visceral, the manual gearboxes. They don't want an electric car because that's probably what they're going to be driving day to day. They want something that's different. So I expect, I don't think the Alpine in electric will sell very well. I mean, it's not the loudest and most vocal and most visceral car in that sector anyway, because the engine's quite subdued, isn't it? But an electric version of that, I can't imagine getting much fun out of it.
Yeah.
And also the powertrain on the A110, it never gets talked about when we're reviewing or driving the car.
It's the least remarkable aspect of the car. Yeah.
So, but even if you were to take that out and just put batteries in, it wouldn't be, because a huge amount of weight.
Suddenly, you've got more weight.
Exactly.
You might have a little bit more performance, but that's not necessarily
it's not the point of the car, is it? Yeah. And then when you look at the Boxster GTS, where the engine is such a part of the experience, taking that away.
Discovered with the 4-cylinder.
Yes, exactly.
Reversed from there.
Yeah, so the 4-cylinder, and then you go a step down and remove the engine altogether. That's a really tough sell, I think.
Which the Porsches generally do deliver dynamically, don't they? But even with that in mind, the idea of an electric. Yeah. I know we've driven a couple and they're quite impressive. Impressive. Like we're surprised.
Go where you point them.
I think we've already got that nailed.
Playing devil's advocate for a moment, though, for Alpine as a brand to survive, at the time that the Renault Lucian product plan was launched under Luca Di Maio when he came in, Alpine was making this one niche sports car. We don't know if they'll ever actually wipe their nose on the A110 because it was such a costly project, and as we've just discussed, sports cars are a niche product. So Alpine was making this sports car. It wasn't really doing anything else. So under Luca Di Maio, they rebranded the F1 team as Alpine, and then they committed to making it an EV only specialist, which now we can look at with the benefit of hindsight and go, was that a good idea? But at the time it made sense.
And that's where we're quick to criticise the industry and the manufacturers for building these cars, but we have to remember they're making decisions a decade ago from what we're seeing today, if not further back. And legislation was battery electric. Well, we won't bother investing in new powertrains. That's the other problem, isn't it?
That's the shortfall.
Audi, Mercedes in recent weeks have said that actually we're not putting that hard stop on our internal combustion engines. There will be a flat plane crank M177 AMG V8 engine coming. Audi will carry, RS5 and RS6 will be plug-in hybrid models.
It's this small volume bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that it makes a lot of sense. I know some people will think, oh, it's just, the people that can afford these cars are the rich people, and, they've got influence, and, they're backtracking on this commitment to, zero emissions. But I reckon the average Ferrari, with the mileage it does, contributes nothing. It wouldn't even register.
Yeah.
So the idea that these small sports cars also have to go electric, I think that's a misnomer. And I think the volumes that Alpine do, they come in that sector of being a very small manufacturer, and they could carry on.
And I bet very few of them get scrapped as well. Which
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, they won't do the miles. They get maintained well and kept on the road. They don't, unless they meet an unfortunate incident or a Cupra Formentor on the Nürburgring, they don't get taken out. But they are, it's all small volume. But maybe, there's a lot going on with strategies being ripped up and having to be rewritten because ultimately legislation can tell you to do something. But I think we mentioned it before, you can't force a consumer. So if the consumer doesn't want whatever you're selling, they won't buy it. And they will just stick with what they've got. And we've gone through for the last, as we're discovering again, back to the Evo eras, aren't we? There is multiple decades of very good cars that stand the test of time, and you can stay in. You think, actually, I don't need to buy a new car. It's not falling apart. It's well maintained. It's affordable to service. But whether there's an opportunity for these low volume, if the big manufacturers are going back into, because that's the struggle, isn't it? Low volume sports car manufacturers don't make their own engines. So as soon as the big OEMs stop doing it,
then they're in trouble.
They're in trouble.
And that's why there were so many joint ventures for a while, weren't there?
But if you're going back, if others are going back, we're going to need an engine here. But we need the economies of scale.
That's that. The story that I did with Cosworth, just before Christmas. Discovered that's a very buoyant business, making supercar engines in various sizes. They've got capacity now. I don't know if anybody out there needs an engine, but they've just stopped making the Gordon Murray engines, which they developed fully and warrant as well. So they're awfully, they're in, and they make them emissions compliant, and they're looking at what's coming, and they think they can keep making them emissions compliant because I guess if you're making a supercar engine, you've got lots of levers, little levers you can pull, tech you can develop.
It's more bespoke, isn't it?
It is more bespoke.
Churning out hundreds of thousands of engines.
But what I was going to say was, if enough people want a smaller, completely compliant engine, maybe somebody like Cosworth is the company to deliver something really small and light and efficient, and that could be a really good. There's a business tip there. But there might be a demand for that if all of these engines from main manufacturers disappear.
Well, it's what BMW have always been quietly good at, isn't it, with their engine and powertrains? They've been quite happy to supply external. Morgan have that relationship with BMW.
Range Rover
now, all that is moving. They're using BMW engines in the Range Rover products, and then you've got Toyota happy to do joint ventures. So,
I wonder what's happening with Honda with the Civic Type R engine. Because of course that's
Ariel's.
That's Ariel's stock.
So that's sadly what's happening we've had the final edition announcement, haven't we, with the Type R? It's another car that's going, but for the UK, we always have to think there is a bigger world out there than this small island. So, is that the sports car thing is always, it has had its peaks and troughs over the years, hasn't it? It got taken out by the hot hatches in the 80s and 90s, but then kind of had a resurgence and stuff.
It will always be there in some form, won't it? I think it's just such a challenging landscape for them at the moment.
I drove the MX-5 the other day.
Yes.
It's a new long-termer. The magic's there. I was driving along and thinking, I don't remember that noise on off the throttle, and it turned out somebody left the towing eye rolling around in the boot. So that was sold
Drawn drive shaft or something.
I think it's this early. It can't be. But there's a lot of magic still in that car. And that should be celebrated.
Because the technology has developed massively in terms of like light weighting and things, making cars well packaged and compact and grippier, more capable. It's just a shame that they probably won't have the engines to go with that package in the future.
And also
Yeah.
things like ADAS, which
Yeah.
is such an evil. But that's why the GR86 has to go out of production, because they'd have to redesign the whole roofline to accommodate new sensors. And again, and for niche products, you can't spend millions and millions to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think they should still sell it somewhere like Mumbai. They should
And then
be
maybe we can all
imported.
import them from there.
Yeah.
Private import. Is that you say you're going to work with Cosworth on a small, four-cylinder screamer of an engine,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
import
Sell it in
GR86s from Mumbai?
Yeah, and fit them with this new engine. Yeah. I think it's a business plan.
Yeah, nice.
Yes. On that note, should we have some of Thomas's fudge?
I don't want some of that.
It's not his fudge. That's the name of the maker. They're Florentines.
Are they?
Everybody loves a Florentine.
In this heat?
Yeah, they're
They'd
probably
be nice and
there's
sticky.
probably one in there now. Yeah, probably all
Pass it round.
melded together.
One big one.
Yeah. So, we'll take a break and go and find a sticky biscuit, and we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 23, Evo podcast. We've talked about so far sports cars, Lotus, Eek, new Golf, Edition 50, which is basically a Club Sport S in all but name. And James, we're going to talk about the second half. James has touched on what he's been up to on his busman's holiday. It didn't involve a coach, but it did involve the Nürburgring, where coaches are often seen driving around. This was Sport Auto, who are the German car magazine that they set all the lap times. This is one of their, it's not a track day, it's a driver training experience
right.
they do at the Nordschleife.
Yeah, it's an event they do it once a year, and it's been running quite a long time. I think they started it in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
And popular events, there were roughly 200 people there for this one. So over 2 days, and they call it perfections training. So the idea is it's an opportunity to learn the Nordschleife in depth in your own car. Quite luckily, I didn't need to take my own car.
You're a journalist, why would you do that?
Exactly.
No one wants to see it Cordoba on the Nürburgring.
I'm true, actually. That sounds fun.
So Porsche had booked a few slots themselves on the day, and they wanted to invite a member of the UK media, and they called Evo, which was nice. So
they called you.
yeah, but the space is for Evo, but somehow I engineered it that I could go on behalf of Evo.
I didn't see the email go round for
No.
that, actually.
No, nor did I. No, funny that.
They
It was an
called- they
Evo
called me,
invite.
actually.
Yeah.
Called you,
Delete. Accept, delete.
Yeah.
So as well as being an opportunity to take part in the perfections training, it was also our first time back in the 911 GT3 since we drove it at its launch back towards the beginning of the year. So picked it up from Cologne Airport, a bit like a rental car, drove straight to the Nürburgring, and over the 2.5 days, based on the trip computer, did I think about 950 kilometres, and more than 700 of those were on the Nürburgring.
Wow.
So that's how much
Do you have
track
an
time
average
you get.
speed?
Oh, I should have looked, actually. That would have been
Right,
interesting
yeah.
to see. But it was really, really hot day. It was this heat wave that's going across Europe at the moment. So it was sort of in the mid-30s both days. I saw 45 degrees C, actually, on the drive back to the airport to Cologne. Didn't change the tyre pressures. It was on Michelin Cup 2 tyres. The end of day one, we went to Manthey Racing, and they checked the car over just to check everything was fine. Tyres are fine, so 2.5 days on the same tyres. Normal road pressures, because Porsche's philosophy is that customers shouldn't have to change the pressures to do a track day. They should be safe.
The Nürburgring is not like a normal circuit,
No.
though, is it?
No.
No.
It's not loads of heavy braking and turning.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a slightly
that's true.
different,
Yeah.
So what's so you obviously, if you're a punter to go and do this, you don't get given a GT3 from Porsche to go and do it.
Yes.
What's the format of the event? How does it work? Because I think there's lots of places lots of companies that do sort of driver training on the Nürburgring. A lot of them tend to be more industry based, don't they? So what's the format? Because it's that circuit that everyone says you can never learn. So how do they get you to be a perfect on the ring?
Yeah, it's really methodical. It begins with, after a sort of big briefing and so on, everybody is assigned an instructor. So some of the instructors were journalists from Sport Auto, but all of them are very experienced sort of competition drivers and set lap times on the Nürburgring. And then a lot of the other instructors were professional racing drivers, test drivers, all of who knew the track very well. And we were separated into groups of no more than 5 or 6 cars each following the instructor. So it was a kind of ducks and drakes setup. So we didn't have an instructor in the car next to us, probably because you couldn't pay me enough danger money to do that. So we would follow the instructor and take it in turns to be in different bits in the queue, if you like. So everyone would get a chance to be directly behind the instructor's car. Then at the end of each lap, you'd pull to one side, move to the back of the queue. So everyone got a turn.
Radio contact as well.
Yeah, we had a radio as well with the instructor.
And did you do it, was it all full laps, or was it broken down into sections, going back and doing it again?
So sadly, we couldn't break it down sort of corner by corner, because I think it's now so expensive and complicated to do that and learn it in chunks. So we did a whole lap each time, but we stopped on the long back straights, sort of where the tourist laps start from.
Yeah.
And at the end of each lap, you'd sort of stop and queue up again, which was a good moment for a breather, actually, because it's quite intense. And then on the second day, from late morning onwards, they took all the cones away, and you could do continuous laps then if you wanted to. And our instructor was a guy called Timo Kluck. He's a tyre test driver for Porsche. Yeah, not to be confused with Timo Glock, different Timo, but really, really good guy, really sort of down to earth, really friendly, but also sort of quite serious when it mattered, because the pace would increase gradually. So we started off very, very slowly, which in itself was a real luxury, because you never get to drive slowly on the Nürburgring, do you?
No.
Unless you're in a Seat Cordoba.
But it gives you a different perspective on the sight lines and the altitude changes and everything.
Yeah.
It's a real luxury.
And each lap, you just increased the speed almost so gradually, you almost didn't realise it was happening. Yeah. And then by the time we'd done maybe 4 or 5 laps, we were going really quite quick. And the radio messages were quite simple. It was, sort of stay to the right here, or third gear here, downshift in a straight line here. And at first you think, he's not really telling us that much. And then it was almost a bit like in Karate Kid, where he's learned by painting the fence and waxing the car. Somehow automatically you knew what to do. So you'd get to that bit and you'd automatically be on the right line, in the right gear.
Yeah.
I'm guessing also you need to have that confidence to follow quite closely, because if you're a train of 5 or 6 cars, what's that, 25, 30 metres, but with a gap, so you come up to, if you're at the back and someone says brake here, like, really?
Yeah.
Or accelerate here, it's like, hang on a minute, I'm just
so when you get into the carousel.
But is it quite intense in terms of you feel you need to keep up with the car in front? You can't hold up your other guests who are also on this experience too, trying to learn it. You've got that added pressure. You're learning the circuit, but making sure you're not ruining anyone else's day.
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult blend, and I think that was sort of part of he made it look very easy, but I think he was constantly judging our speed from the mirrors and kind of adjusting his speed accordingly. And I think the fact that he increased it so gently each time kind of worked, and if he did see someone falling back, he'd radio, get us to bunch up again. It was quite interesting to see the other cars people turned up with, because roughly 70% of the cars there were Porsches, and I've never seen so many 911 GT3s and GT3 RSs.
Well, they're rare
in
cars.
my life.
But at the end of it, did you think you knew the Nürburgring?
It's really funny, because I can see how people can have accidents there by being overconfident, because it is like the devil sitting on your shoulder. You think, you got this, you're really good, you could be a specialist.
It doesn't go off.
And also, there are more corners the faster you go. That's the weird thing, because there's this eternal debate on the Nürburgring. How many corners are there really? And some people say there's more than 100. Some people say there's sort of 70. But the faster you go, suddenly there's more corners. What wasn't a corner before really is a corner now. And if you're not on the right line, no matter what you do, you are going to go off. And the car's loaded differently. And there were places we were in 3rd gear at the start of day 1, and we were in 5th gear at the end of day 2, So it was really, really, really interesting. And every time he'd stop, do a debrief, say, how are you getting on? Everyone would be, full of adrenaline, go, it's great, we're having a really good time. And that's when he'd say, okay, never lose the respect for the track. And he'd become very serious at that point.
So anyone can do this event? Anyone can
I believe so.
rock up?
Yeah, I believe it's open to the public. I think it's, it's not cheap. It sort of costs, I think, something like €3,000 for the basic ticket. But then if you consider how much track time you get, the fact, I had to leave early on day 2 to get back to the airport. Could have kept going.
So that's is that per day or for the 2-day course?
I believe that's for the 2-day course, though I'd have to check that.
It's quite
it's
a lot.
quite good value if you consider the amount of track time you get.
But it's training as well. It's not
Absolutely,
just...
that's the thing.
It's not just free time on the track, is it? It's,
and so much safer than doing a tourist day or similar.
Yeah, because you never know who you're with. And it's very well controlled by the sounds of it.
And actually, when they did open the track up to do continuous lapping halfway through day 2, Timo, the instructor, said, so we're going to do something very important now. He said, we're all going to go and have a coffee and a break. He said, because now everyone is tempted to go crazy, you know. So,
did they get you on a sim at all to learn the layout? Or?
No, they didn't. Although I have heard some pro drivers say that there's no way they'd learn it as quickly as they would without playing it first.
Right,
I say playing a sim isn't a game, but you know, but even playing it on the PlayStation at least gives you an idea of where it goes,
where the corners are, and what's coming up.
But what it can't teach you is the bumps and the gradients, because they're totally different in real life. Absolutely. And the track changes every year. They change some of the curbs, they resurface some bits. So it's a very different track from.
And who were the sort of people on it? Were they people looking at doing VLM racing or whatever it's called this week? Or are they just track day people who are spending a lot of money on track days but not feeling they're getting the most out of the car and the circuit?
Yeah, I think many of them were very experienced track day goers. Everyone was wearing very fast shoes. I noticed. I was wearing normal sneakers and I was sort of a bit out of place because everyone else was in sort of race boots. But I think it was people who really wanted the chance to sort of go in depth, because obviously it's not the sort of circuit you can just hire out yourself. And on the tourist days, with there being so much traffic, and it gets so dangerous on the tourist days, I think it was the safest opportunity to really get to know it properly.
It actually sounds quite good value. Put all that together.
Yeah, and very few cars had any kind of incidents or anything. You know, of all those cars there, saw 2 cars stopped on the track, but that looked like a mechanical issue, or maybe run out of fuel perhaps, which is we got through quite a lot of fuel.
You got that on top, but as John said, that does, for the amount of, if you're saying you did 700 clips,
I know, I still can't believe that. I really can't.
We'll try and work that out. It's about 17 kilometres, isn't it,
something like that. So it did more than 30 laps of the track.
And but it's with the tuition. You wonder whether when you do those tuition things, whether it's on the road or not, you actually, obviously you're taking a lot more, so you learn the circuit more, but that also should mean you get much more from the experience, rather than just rocking up and going, right, I'm going to do 6 laps and having that frustration and overdriving.
I think I would. I never had a sort of big moment through this whole days, and I think if I was there on my own, I would have had at least one moment where I really scared myself,
maybe only one moment.
The last moment potentially. And one of the best experiences I've ever had behind the wheel of a car, that just before I left, got to do 4 really quite, I say very fast, for me it was very fast, I'm sure for an expert it wasn't that quick, but following Timo really closely behind him, and he upped the pace a lot, and
nice.
It was so intense and so exhilarating and such an incredible experience, and I'll never forget that. And I think had I not gone through the stages of the training, I wouldn't have been able to go as quick as that, because it was that step by step.
And it would have, you wouldn't have had that confidence to know, actually I can commit here, but not because I'm just following someone, which
but
is
also you can trust Timo as well.
Exactly. You know, he's definitely not on the wrong line.
And was that the first time you've driven at the Nürburgring?
So I'd done 6 laps before that, over spread out by about 2 years. They say 6 laps actually is the dangerous time, because that's when you think you know the track, they say. So you should watch out.
Six laps. No,
don't. That's they say when people think they know the track, and you really don't at all.
You've done each corner 6 times. And that's like barely anything.
I mean, there were some bits, you know, halfway through day 1, I was still vaguely trying to remember. There was and some bits look the same as well.
They do. Certainly in the last third.
But those.
And the last third also comes at you thick and fast.
Yes, it really does. And there's jumps there, which if you're on the wrong line, you're not going to land in the right place. But I'd done 6 laps, but spread over 2 years on different. So funnily enough, very topical, the first time I drove it was on the launch of the GTI Club Sport S, the car we mentioned earlier, back in 2016, I think it was.
Good car to do it in, probably.
Very good car to do it in, because really neutral, really safe, and it was following Benny Loichter, who set the record in the car. He set the record in, actually, which was quite an experience, because he was taking the same lines as his record lap, which is quite a lot of curve, plus a bit of grass.
Straight lining.
So that was 4 laps, and then a year later I did 2 laps in what is the current BMW 3 Series, but back then it was still a camouflage prototype. So I was following a BMW engineer in an M2 around the track. So yeah, suddenly really increased my knowledge by quite a lot.
Quite a sudden,
big
spike, isn't it? A big jump up. You've been to the ring, John.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
What was your first experience of the ring?
It was.
I can't imagine it was in a Club Sport S.
No, not back in 1980, probably 7 or 98. 88, 87. It was the Audi 90 launch, and I was partnered up with the Fast Lane journo, because with Motor Magazine and who I was working for and Fast Lane were part of the same stable. And that was Tim Holmes, who went into PR afterwards. I think he's retired now.
He's retired, yes.
But, we were in the briefing on the morning of the drive, and they said, bad German accent coming up, but they said, "We are here, the Nürburgring is here, don't go there." So, of course, we just went straight there. And at that time, I think you paid about 5 Deutschmarks to a man who took a little trestle thing with stop out of the way, and you were off on the Nürburgring. And it was a terrible day. It was really foggy and wet. And I remember just in the passenger seat thinking, I have no idea what's going on here. It's because there was so little distance to view, you couldn't get the character of anything. And we got to the end of the lap. And he said, "You've got to have a go now." And I said, "No chance. I don't, I know it's the Nürburgring, but I can't see a thing." But he insisted, so he paid the euros or the Deutschmarks, and that was my first lap. And I've done a few since. But I think the best way to learn the Nürburgring, PlayStation.
Right.
If you do that first, at least you know which way the corners go.
You have your bearings, don't you?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and I know on a PlayStation sim you don't get the elevation and all the rest of it, but it puts you in such a good stead.
It's a head start, isn't it?
Yeah. The first time I did raced at the Nürburgring, I'd only done it twice, and the first was in a Sirocco, so I did all of my training in a Golf on the sim that we had downstairs in the office. Got loads of laps in on that, and when I arrived at the Nürburgring, did my first few laps in the Sirocco, I was thinking, this is nothing like the PlayStation. At the end of the race, I thought, this is the PlayStation.
Because the speed and the...
then it all makes sense. You've got no fear by that stage.
It's a mental thing, isn't it? You've got to kind of switch that part of your brain off. Because you don't have that fear in the game. So
but there's no respawning.
Yeah, exactly. Press the reset.
But the best bit was on the PlayStation, you come down to Swedenkreuz after that long downhill straight with, I think it's 250 clicks on the Sirocco.
Pretty quick.
And you just lift and turn.
Wow.
Back on the throttle. Wow. You do that in the PlayStation, no problem. But then when you find you're doing it in real life, then you think, you absolutely, Gran Turismo, you absolutely nailed this. So that's the best way to learn it, for sure.
Makes sense.
You do a lot of sim driving. Have you done the Nordschleife on?
I've done it a lot, hundreds of laps, but also hundreds of crashes, digital ones. I'm probably in the 6 lap club, I think, at this stage.
What's your car of choice on a sim for?
So for the ring, I like to go completely all out. So McLaren M23.
Oh wow!
Which is, and I've got a direct drive wheel with no power assistance on it, so it's just fighting your hands the whole way. You're sweating.
It's not broken your wrists.
Yeah. There's an emergency stop just in case it does attached to the wheel. So a big red button on the ring.
It's nuts.
Yeah, but
the panic button.
Yeah, honestly, that thing. But if you do clip a wall or a curb because it's open wheel and you've got damage on, you can actually genuinely break your wrists because the wheel in the game is obviously going to jerk and then your hand's gone. So
wow,
the stop is quite useful.
So if you turn up in his Seat, that will be like the calmest
absolutely
possible.
I'm ready.
Have you actually driven the Nürburgring?
No, not in real life, no.
There you go.
Well,
there's a story in there somewhere.
There is.
Is there? But it probably is, but James has taken it.
There was. It was a great story.
There was,
great opportunity. But,
if I've known about it.
You need to be quicker on your emails.
You
need a hotline.
You'd be faster than it.
Yeah,
with all our training.
We both know that.
Not so sure.
Mine was first lap was in a Chris Harris's B7 RS4, which of course, being Monkey's car, was full of stuff. So every time you went around any corner crest, you just had spanners and towing eyes and dog baskets and all kinds of things. But
what year was this?
Early 2000s. So probably 03, 04. It was on an RMA day who do their days there, which are very good. And obviously Destination Nürburgrings do do their days, and the guys at RSR, I think if you can't get a friendly PR to phone up and book you a GT3 in 2 days on the Sport Auto day, I think well, that sounds very worthwhile doing anyway. But I think if you want to do the ring, you want to do it with the likes of RSR or Destination Nürburgring and RMA, don't you? It's such a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
You want to get the best out of it, so you need to invest in it to get the best out of it. If you,
it's almost like a 911 though, isn't it? It's people rail against it because everybody goes on about it, but once you've been there, it does get under your skin very quickly.
And I can see how it gets addictive as well. I can see how people want to keep going back and back and back again.
Just risk and reward, isn't it? That addictive kind of.
I think Monkey and a photographer had season passes and used to go there at every opportunity.
Mark Bramley, wasn't it?
That's
and Chris had season passes. They had also a similar. I was working for another mag, which Chris was contributing to, and it was 997 GT3 RS launch, and you picked them up from Stuttgart. He phoned me beforehand. He goes, "I don't think we can get to the ring to shoot it and back again."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he proved himself wrong. They did exactly that, and then they roped in 2 lads who were doing a track day 2 English lads who had a TT, roped them in to do some car-to-car photography as well.
Brilliant, absolutely.
Just out of sight of being told off for doing photography on the ring.
Wow.
But it is that place that you do get hooked. So if there's if you're in the right car and you're like, I've got to go. Even though you could wait a couple of months or whenever and have it in a more relaxed state, you're like, no, I've got to go and got to do it. And
it is addictive.
It just has that draw, doesn't it?
Very quickly speaking about the 911, I mean, I should say the GT3 was amazing around there. It was so safe.
Really?
So safe, so stable, so precise. And
you'd think it had been developed there, wouldn't you?
But it was kind of the perfect as a 500 horsepower car can be to learn a track. It was.
What would you recommend to learn the ring in?
I think you'd just pick a hot hatch, like you say, the Club Sport. Good visibility, nice stable platform. Just get used to it and just feel how it, as you say, it changes the more speed you've got. Just get used to it in something that's not going to bite you.
Not a McLaren M23 then.
No. But if
altitude training.
Once you've mastered that, anything else was a walk in the park. Isn't it? Literally.
Have you not tried anything else? You've gone straight into...
I just go straight in with the McLaren. Yeah, I love it. It beats me up around the whole lap.
God, nuts. Madness. Should we calm it down from the Nürburgring and go back to current instalment of our Evo eras? So this is our series we've been doing that... we should just give him a mention. It was Peter Tomlin's idea, and I think Peter had the idea it would just be a series running each month that he could write from the kitchen of his new home, just some sort of archive and asking us for a few quotes and things. And then it kind of exploded into a monthly series of 30 pages of editorial and 4,000 or 5,000 words.
No.
Secure
7,000 words.
You had an extra car, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
So we're very grateful for everyone who supported us with getting the cars and still is supporting us as we do the last 2 or 3 eras. The 90s one is just about to go off sale, or probably has gone off sale by the time this comes out, and that was obviously the very beginning of Evo, but the 2000 seems to be peak of
that is Evo.
That is the era of not only what you guys were doing on the mag in that time, but also what the car industry was doing, because everyone was building a performance car, more than one, and constantly replacing them. So you want to run through what they can expect for
what we had. James has got the list. I can probably remember it, but James has the list.
So we, starting with the hot hatches, obviously one of the biggest cars of the noughties was the new Mini. It was the return of Mini and the first new Mini. So we had a Cooper S.
Yeah, which looking back, I had to go through all the issues, and it won everything it was in, just about. The Mini Cooper S. It just took on sports cars, other hot hatches, even took on a Pagani Zonda. It lost. Step too far. But then there was the Golf.
That's right, Golf Mark V, Golf GTI, which I drove up to the test in Yorkshire. It's such an impressive car.
What a car.
I felt brand new. I mean, this was a very well looked after one.
It was almost brand new, wasn't it? It was 6,000 miles or something.
That's right, It belongs to Volkswagen UK.
It was manual as well, which was interesting. But everything there was manual.
But that was such a big car for Volkswagen, wasn't it? Because the Mark III and Mark IV is probably going to get complaints, but God, they were awful.
They weren't GTIs, were they?
No. They had a badge that said GTI, but I mean, I just wrote a piece I think it was, I can't remember which editorial leader I think it was, talking about the Golf. I think it's telling with the Mark IV that the best Mark IV and the one that actually we'd all want is the 1.9 diesel.
Yeah, good point.
That's the one you'd have if you're buying a Mark IV. You wouldn't have the petrol, the 1.8
the
5 valve.
deuce pump.
That's it. You'd have that
150 horsepower.
Yeah.
That was
loads of torque.
I think I remember Dickie taking one to the Nürburgring.
And getting banned from the Nürburgring.
Yeah, because the tyres were blue. The sidewalls had been used that much.
But yeah, so that Mark V was a Mark V GTI.
Yeah, that was make or break time, wasn't it?
And it was
And it made it.
Absolutely, it did.
Then we had a kind of trio of, I guess, sort of GT style, sort of sports car GT junior supercars. So we had Aston Martin V8 Vantage.
Which was beautiful.
Oh,
car.
it's so nice. Yeah,
Beautiful.
it's aged so well. And again, that one was a very well cared for.
Yes, low
car.
mileage, original tyres.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
but felt good.
Felt great.
Yeah.
That must have had
Yeah.
your tyre testing sort of itchy going, ooh.
I'm not going to like this. Oh, it's all right. It's actually really good.
I didn't know they were the original tyres until just now. But
You didn't know. There you go.
Before that fourth gear oversteer.
Yeah, they
Dickie
were.
did that.
Yeah, I think they were 2008 tyres.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fair play. Well, they felt good.
They did.
And then we
Bridgetown.
had.
Well done, Bridgetown.
Yeah. Then a kind of common thread running through every one of the era's tests is we've got a 911 Carrera in each test.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this one was a 997 Carrera S,
Yeah.
two-wheel drive.
Guards red.
Guards red, yeah.
Gen 1 997, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or Gen 2? Gen 1.
Gen 1, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the kind of new kid on the block to rival the 911 was the Audi R8. It was a very nice car, that one.
It was a beautiful
V8 manual coupe.
Yeah, Magna Ride. But he said if the dampers go, he's just going to change it for the standard ones, which most people do because it's a great car anyway.
Yeah.
On the standard fixed dampers.
And then the final car in the test, because unusually we had an extra one for this one. We had the Lamborghini Murcielago.
You've missed a car out.
Oh, I have missed a car.
It was M3.
Oh, the BMW M3.
E46,
Yes, E46,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which was also a lovely car.
Yeah.
And that was on the 18s, wasn't it?
It was on 18s because it was the car of Chris Porritt, who developed the AM V8 Vantage.
Yeah.
When he was
Yeah.
there.
Interesting.
So he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
on 18s. He's got a
Yeah.
set of 19s, but he uses the 18s.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that. And then the last car, as
And
you
then last
were
car,
about to
yeah.
say, was
Lamborghini Murcielago and sort of the Murcielago 4 Evo magazine because
Yes.
it's the orange car that
Yeah.
often appears in Fast Fleet.
You say orange car. I saw a picture of it last night. It's blue.
has it been wrapped?
Yeah, he mentioned he was thinking of doing that. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been
I
wrapped
think-
in a blue.
Yeah, I think is it a dark blue or is it?
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
darkish blue.
There's a story. We should do a podcast with Simon George, who is
Yes.
the owner of the car and the creator of the Britain's biggest model railway as well.
Yes.
Check it out online.
Yeah.
I sat in the car and had a chat with him about his Murcielago, which he had from brand new, and the car there's so little of the original car left. You went through it. It's in the feature, but it got written off as well on because it was being used as part of the sixth gear experience, these driving experiences, and it got written off at Chobham. And he was describing because he thought it was a write-off. There's only one place in the UK that could straighten out the chassis, and they had a look at it and they said they could do it, but it took him 4 years to get the money together because the insurance company wriggled out of paying out. So it took him 4 years to get the money together. He got bits sent over. There's a van of bits came over from Lamborghini because they were well behind it at the time because it was a famous car by that time anyway. And I said, "God, you got to drive it again?" He said, "Yeah, I took it down the bypass." I said, "What was that like?" And he said, "It was pretty emotional."
I can imagine.
He cried.
Yeah, I'm
Cried.
not surprised.
I said, "Did you say sorry to the car?" He said, "Yeah, I did."
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's now on its fifth interior because he's got the numbers at his fingertips.
Yeah,
There's 8,026 people, I think, have driven that
Yeah.
as
Wow.
part of the
Yeah.
sixth gear experience.
Yeah.
Wasn't he
It's-
thinking of selling it? Not to like put a damper
He
on
did.
the
He
whole-
did a road trip to Norway, which he was meant to do in the pandemic, I think. That's where our managing editor would say Stuart doesn't read anything in the mag. But I think he was meant to do it in the pandemic, got delayed, so did it again. And then he wrote in, he did the trip, did the report for the mag with the sign off, and now that's it. I've driven it everywhere I want to drive it. I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
And then within 4 weeks. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not selling it. You can't sell this thing. It's a bit
I'll
like,
make it blue now.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, that's the thing. When he got it, he was a younger man. It was
Yeah.
20 odd years ago, and he loved it back then. The attention, and still now, it parked up on the launch venue, and it's just surrounded by people.
Yeah.
They come out of
It's such a
nowhere.
magnet.
So yeah, he's finally got to the point where he doesn't like the attention, which is why it's gone blue.
okay.
So yeah, but it's 300,000 plus miles on it, and the gear shift is so well worn.
The gear shift's
Sweet as
amazing.
ever.
It was so easy to change
But
gears
it-
smoothly.
yeah, it wasn't, not giving anything away, it wasn't the best car on the event. I think supercars have probably evolved to be much more drivable and user friendly.
Well, looking at that list, isn't it? The Mercy is the last of an old school supercar, isn't
Very
it? Whereas
much.
all the cars on that test were the first of where we are today, aren't they? So the Vantage, the 911, 996,
Yeah.
and 997, the E46 M3 was a
Ah.
huge. A lot of those cars replaced mediocre cars.
And they were on this road, which is a difficult road, a bit like the North York Moors Road. It's a difficult road, but they all shone. They
Yes.
were all really
Yeah.
good. You get them mid-corner, and they're just there.
Yeah.
They're poised.
Yeah.
So yeah, no spoilers, but we're looking for the best decade, and
It set its stall out
It-
pretty
it-
well.
yeah.
didn't
off the
it?
surge.
Is it because this is the one that you've written?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thought it might be. No, it's been a fascinating series to
It
pull
has.
together. We're doing
Yeah.
after we finish recording this, some of the guys are off to do 2010s.
Yep.
Not me.
Not
Okay.
John. He's off to go and do a tyre test, our annual tyre test, which is 19s.
19s this year. Yeah, we moved up a size on a rear drive car, so
Yeah.
that'll be
So that'd be
a bit of a
interesting.
change.
Yep. But yeah, the Evo eras has been, I think, for everyone from those that didn't experience the cars when they were box fresh and new,
Yeah.
to those that did and having that memory, it's sort of
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, come the 2010s, you'll have been born by that time.
Yeah,
so-
exactly. Yeah. I don't know about any of these. Like, I've seen them for the first time.
We
What's
should
that?
really find out which car you were brought home from hospital in and see if we can include that in a test.
It wasn't a Testarossa.
But yeah, so that's carrying on. So we are going to go up to the 2020s as well. So we're not ignoring new stuff, because I think it'd be quite easy to ignore. Ooh, the new stuff's not as good.
There's
But
some
Yeah.
pretty good stuff out there.
there's some very good stuff, and there's as we've just touched on this in this podcast, haven't we, with what's happening with powertrains and stuff like that. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's certainly been great looking back, but it's going to be it's just as important looking forward. So I think it's probably a good place to end on the 2000s, on John's 7,000 word.
7,250 actually.
Okay,
It's on the invoice.
thanks. Yeah, I thought it would be along with the biscuits. Well, thank you for that, and for the being here today, John, James, Yusuf. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trying to keep you away from a racetrack in July, because I'm going on holiday, so you're going to have to put the magazine to bed. Thank you, everyone. We will see you all next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, Stu.